Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. So today I'm going to talk about Linux and VR. I don't ever really hear any of the other YouTubers talk about this, so I'm going to. Um, Sadly, it's Bradley has brought up Linux and VR in the past. I don't know what kind of detail it's got into, but he's mentioned that it's a thing that exists. So the first thing really is that if you don't have the Valve Index, I've got nothing for you. You probably have no Linux support whatsoever, which is a shame because initially Oculus did have Linux support. It's after the Facebook acquisition that it all got canned. Thanks, Mark. Anyway, so Linux and VR, you're really talking Proton. I don't think there's many native Linux VR programs, but actually there's not zero, and that's interesting. For once, I'm actually going to check this. Right, so I've checked it. Neos, Neos, I don't know, it's called Neos. Neos actually does have native Linux support. As far as I know, that is the only thing really. There's a couple of tools that actually do have support for it, such as OVR Advanced Settings actually does run in Linux. Although it's not working for me at the moment, but I'm running things through some different stuff to try and get stuff working. But it's worked in the past, and maybe it'll work again. I don't know. And that's the general state of Linux and VR. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So a good example. Well, you know what? I tested out a whole bunch of games, and I'll go through and tell you what my experiences are. Actually, the first one, the Steam VR home room itself, is pretty awful. It works, it does what it's supposed to do, but it's janky and jittery and looks like shit. It's actually pretty awful to be in the home room for very long. Launch your game and get out of there. It's worse than the games. It's pretty strange. First game I tried, Legendary Tales. And that is a pretty great success. It works just like it's native, runs great. I tested DLSS yesterday and it didn't work, but I should have retested it today. But either way, it ran perfectly fine. I was fighting skeletons and killing goblins and bats, no problem today with it, even without DLSS. I suspect it actually might work as of today. And I'll get into that a little bit later why I say that and why I should have just checked it again, but I'm not going to load everything up again. It's fine. Second game I tested was Waltz of the Wizard. This was a total failure. The game would launch and I was able to go into the tower, but and actually into the courtyard as well, but when I actually tried to launch into the actual game, it would just crash on me. So that sucks. Surprising, next I tried VR chat. I swear this worked. And I think it actually just works just fine in, say, desktop mode. But in actual VR mode, it just wouldn't launch. I swear this worked in the past, though. So, I'm testing this all with Proton Experimental. So what's true today may not be true tomorrow. And that's your giveaway, or your takeaway from what's VR and Linux is going to be like. It's sometimes it works, sometimes not. You can probably stabilize this and get something pretty decent if you are a bit more picky with your Proton versions. Generally, that's kind of often how it is. These days, I find just about any pancake game just works fine. If you just forget you're running it in Proton, it all works like it's native. It doesn't matter. Everything's fine. But VR as a niche, and then Linux on VR is a niche of a niche. So it doesn't get a whole lot of attention. Although we'll see how true that is moving onward as Valve begins working on the Index 2, which is going to use something based on SteamOS. We can all pretty logically assume. So that means Arch Linux and Proton. So hopefully that is what's happening, and we'll start to get our VR support up there. A big problem is we don't have motion smoothing, and I believe this is NVIDIA's fault. NVIDIA sucks in Linux for that kind of thing. Even, for example, their DLSS support in Linux is shoddy as shit. As far as I know, there's only a handful of games that support it, and they have to run Vulkan. I don't think Legendary Tales runs Vulkan. Actually, I really don't know what it runs. I'm sure I could find out. The only game for VR that I know that runs Vulkan is No Man's Sky. And I'll be talking about that later. So that'll be interesting because I love No Man's Sky. I think I mentioned this before, but No Man's Sky is the game that made me get into VR. I just had to experience all that crazy stuff in VR, and it's so worth it. But I have some other comments about that particular game and Linux and VR. Let's move on. Next, I tried Pistol Whip. Works like it's native. It's great. Pistol Whip's such a good game. It's so much better than Beat Saber. You're just like hitting little blocks and flailing around. Yeah, no. Or it can be cool and like blast guys like John Wick. And then now they have cowboy stuff in there and revolvers and a break shotgun. That's cool. That's a good game. That's the beat game to get. Especially because I can't tell if there's a beat at all because I'm too old for dubstep. And I get like a 70-80% hit, like on beat hit ratio. That seems good, I think. I don't know. I shoot guys and it's fun. Next is Pavlov. Success. I didn't overly test Pavlov a whole lot. I haven't actually had time to get into Pavlov. That's something I plan to do. One of these days I'm going to go online for the first time on Pavlov and I'll bring you guys with. You can watch me get the shit shot out of me. Or maybe this old lady's more formidable than you think. I guess we'll find out. Probably going to get the shit shot out of me. That's fine. It'll all be fun. Next is Cosmo Dread. I love/hate this game. It's too scary for me. I know, what a stupid thing. It's a game, but in VR it feels so real, guys. Oh, and their sound design. It works perfectly. As far as I can tell, that game works perfectly. So that's nice. Now you can be scared shitless in Linux too. That's fun. So that's good. We're doing okay so far. Saints and Sinners. That's one of the best VR games, and just an amazing game in general. And I don't think that big new update's out yet. If it is, it's coming out right away. That's going to be exciting. One sort of gotcha at that, though, is it didn't work. Yeah. I'm not sure if this isn't... it was just weird. Like, at first, it didn't load up a controller configuration. So when you load that game up, for some reason, it wants to make you, like, reset your viewer, play style, whatever. But there was no button bound to do that. And I couldn't set one. So when I tried to set one, it didn't work. So that was weird. But then I relaunched Steam VR and then it did work. And I couldn't load the default configuration, but I could load somebody else's. So I just loaded some fella's VR config. And then that did work. But when I tried to continue my save, it just barfed. So that's pretty disappointing. Because I'd like to have seen that game work. And it may work on a different Proton version. And lastly is No Man's Sky. Here's the complicated one. Because this game runs like shit in Windows for me. On the desktop, it's okay. In VR, it's unplayably bad. It's just repulsive. You have to lower everything. It's just disgusting looking, even with DLSS, which is actually supported in Linux because it's Vulkan. Valve's expanding, or Steam and all these guys, they're expanding it to support. Actually, this is really just NVIDIA. NVIDIA's expanding their DLSS support in Linux, but they're dragging their fucking asses because they're NVIDIA. That's so fucking frustrating. But this game, which really is the game that really needs DLSS, it actually works. It didn't work yesterday, though. But there's a Proton update today. Now it does. Maybe tomorrow it'll be broken again. Who knows? But it's working as of now. Although I didn't super need it. In Linux, this game runs good. It looks good. It runs good. Yeah. It's actually perfectly fun in Linux. And even on like Pancake Linux, it ran much better for me. So this makes, I spent an entire day trying to figure out why it was running badly in Windows for me. None of my other games seem to have that problem, but No Man's Sky just, I don't know, it's incompatible with Windows or something. Maybe, I don't know. That's obviously ridiculous. Probably is that my Windows install is kind of ancient. And it's kind of ancient because prior to my getting into VR, I never used it. I installed it for the thought that there might be some games that I needed for, my friends are into that just didn't work in Linux for whatever reason. That actually never really came up. So the install just really sat there. I just never used it for ever. So it probably just, it had updates installed on it. You know what updates do to Windows, right? So it was just shit. And I bet if I reinstalled Windows and reinstalled the drivers and did all that shit, it actually might fix No Man's Sky. In the meantime, it sure runs well on Linux. So, okay, when I look at it later for a video, I will do so in Linux. Fine, whatever works. So that's interesting. So that's sort of the games I tested. That's not a great success. Like there is No Man's Sky is a great success, sure, but that's really one. Legendary Tales was fine too. That was perfect. Pistol Whip is perfect. As far as I can tell, Pavlov is perfect. So, a lot of games do work, but it sort of feels like the old days when Proton was brand new, and whether a game worked or not, who knows? And that's kind of what Linux VR is like right now. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Who knows? You gotta test it, find out, fill it with Proton versions, see what happens. And maybe you'll have a success and you'll be pretty good. But it's not reliable, so for now, it seems like, once again, we have another reason to keep our fucking Windows installs around. And if you have an Oculus, then you've been screwed for years anyway. So yeah, that's where Linux is in VR. I have been unable to get clear answers of what it's like for the AMD side. AMD drivers in Linux are fabulous. They're probably better than the Windows versions, actually. That's interesting. And I was curious to know if you had something like a 6800 XT, how your experience in Linux would be for VR. I know that, again, motion smoothing is not supported in Linux. That's not reprojection. That is supported. That's just new. That's from the 470 versions of the drivers. That is brand new. So we finally have that extremely basic functionality. But boy, do you really want it though, right? So maybe someday we'll get motion smoothing as well. As far as AMD goes, I actually have no idea what the state is. It seems like it's just so niche, nobody's asked the question yet. And that sucks. But time will tell. I mean, Linux has been around forever. It's going to continue to be around forever. We have time. I think that probably wraps it up for Linux and VR. Just to say, it's rough. It's not as good as an experience you're going to get in Windows. It's quite crashy in terms of Steam VR itself. Steam VR itself is kind of awful on Linux. Worse than the games in a lot of cases. So that's just something to be aware of. It's going to be a bit of a frustrating experience a lot of the time. Some games will just magically work like they were just meant to be, and that's fantastic. But a lot won't. So yeah, Steam VR on Linux. Cool, but rough. Oh, actually, real quick, I do have another subject. Since we're talking about Linux, and we're really talking about Index, I have a minor update about my VR Wave review of their prescription lenses. This is interesting. I complained bitterly to them. I was really annoyed by how unsatisfied with the product I was. They got back to me and said they're coming out with a new version of their prescription lenses that should solve my problem. What surprised me is that they're sending me these for free. That's pretty great, because I doubt they know I have a YouTube channel, and if they did, they know it's tiny. So, but nonetheless, in the next little while, I'll receive a version 2 of the Index prescription lenses from VRWave, and I will have a re-review of what those are like. I have high hopes because wearing your glasses in VR fucking sucks. And it'd be a lot nicer if I could just whip them off and play with, without that extra lens in the way, which is really quite annoying on an Index. You just got kind of a glary display in the first place. You had a third layer of lenses. It's quite worse. So, yeah. This is a minor update. I have high hopes for it, and I think it's pretty cool that they are sending me those for free. So, interesting. All right, guys. That's it for now. See ya.